was late one night. I just decided I'm not able to sleep. I'm going to code it for myself. I wrote it. I ended up posting in the forum, and this guy, Simon Scrapes, got a hold of it. He made a video about it, started downloading the community, and then all of a sudden it just like blew up.
It's kind of crazy. N8N is useful, but it's so much more useful with MCP. So it's kind of hard to imagine a world where it didn't have that. JD, welcome to the show.
Hey, Aiden, great to be here.
I'm super excited to do this. People are in for such a treat, and everybody will agree once they know a little bit about your background. I first found out about you on X when I guess like maybe you can tell us a story of MCPs and N8N and those early days and maybe tell everybody what you did there.
So my background is in leadership. I do a lot of like R&D type style stuff, but I always keep my hands on the keyboard. And so I was getting really interested in MCP when it first came out, and I didn't want to use it through Claude. I didn't see it as a Claude-only thing. And so I wanted to try and connect MCP to N8N. N8N is an automation tool. They have a lot of good AI agent things going on in that. And this was like very early on. I think it was back in like December or January, maybe. So I was looking at the MCP protocol, looking at it through TypeScript. I knew how to build N8N nodes, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna just try and build this MCP N8N node to connect to my own AI agents because I hadn't really seen anyone do that yet. So, and I saw like on the forum, people were kind of asking for it. So it was late one night. I just decided I'm not able to sleep. I'm gonna code it for myself. I wrote it. I ended up posting in the forum, and this guy, Simon Scrapes, got a hold of it. He made a video about it, started downloading the community, and then all of a sudden it just like blew up. So I was seeing like a lot of YouTubers that I knew were like using my community node, and they're like, "Have you seen this?" And I was like, "Actually, I wrote it." So I go under like the pseudonym of Nerding.io, and that was what I put it out as. So not as putting my name attached to it as JD. And so it was really funny to kind of see like different people using it and have no idea it was me. But it ended up getting like 1 million downloads, which would like,
That's insane.
yeah, it was crazy. And what was super cool is, since then N8N is kind of they've come up with their own MCP server, their own MCP client. And even in like the announcement, they even gave like a little reference to Nerding.io and to Simon Scrapes as kind of be like forefront of this. So it was super cool to be a part of that.
So who is Simon? I'm actually not familiar with him. Is he just like a YouTuber about NA and stuff?
Yeah, another YouTuber. He focuses on like automation specifically. So like really popular in the N8N world. He's kind of like blown up since him and I were kind of talking, but it was just really cool. Like just how I met him was like, hey, this is interesting. Like, I'm making a video on it. And I was like trying to make a video at the same time. It was really fun to meet other people in the space and just kind of see how this thing blew up.
That's great. Crazy. So a million nodes, I mean, sorry, a million downloads as a community node. And so what it did was, I guess, like in the beginning, you could only use MCP and Claude. And then, so you just made it possible for MCP to work inside of N8N. And so, and then like later on, they adopted it and, well, maybe like they just built their own implementation, but this was there before any of that.
Yeah, like basically there was a TypeScript SDK for MCP. And so you could really build MCP into anything. And so I just so happened to build it into N8N, and it kind of went from there.
It's kind of crazy to just imagine. I always thought of NAN is useful, but it's so much more useful with MCP. So it's kind of hard to imagine a world where it didn't have that to some extent where we are today.
Yeah, and even in like my first iteration, you had to like explicitly say this is the MCP tool that I want to use. And this is one of the fun things about like open source is someone actually suggested to me, hey, there's a way to dynamically do this so that the AI will actually choose which MCP tool to use. So then I went and like built that feature, and that was like deep in the documentation. And so it was just really fun to like have, a small community of people that were just being really nerdy and trying to solve a problem.
I have a question about this. Since you're a builder in this space and you've been thinking about this space, what does it mean for software in general, where every company seems to be building an MCP server, or at least any smart company is building their own MCP server, and people are accessing these MCP tools, whether it's through Cursor or whatever else, and people are just not logging into software tools in the same way. So what does this all mean? Like, do you have a sense of what the future looks like now that MCP is a thing?
So for me, I think the way that we're using MCP is really just starting out, right? And there's a lot of still like security concerns around it, especially when you start dealing with sensitive data and things like that. I think there's going to be an evolution of what MCP is and how you leverage it. So I think the protocol will continue to advance. We're seeing things like MCP can now do elicitation, so it'll actually ask the user like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And when we start thinking about companies and logging in as software, to me, the way I look at MCP is sure, you can actually just like wrap your APIs, your previous APIs in an MCP and turn it into an MCP. But it's starting to become a lot more in the sense that one, you could actually charge for those MCPs. So I haven't really seen too many people do this, but now since authentication is more of a protocol, you can actually rather than putting in code snippets, you can actually log in, like say, like log in through Google, and then it will attach it to an MCP account. So you could actually charge like a credit-based system or a metered billing through like Stripe. And we're also starting to see other protocols pop up, right? So there's another one that just came out, which is the Agentic Commerce Protocol. So we're seeing things like working similar to MCP and kind of this on-site or this insight of like, how do we build a communication protocol between these agents, which is really what like MCP was meant to be. And so now we're starting to see other things. So I think there's a lot of different aspects of MCP and like this idea of communicating between different agents and actions.
So tell me more about the Agentic Commerce Protocol. Who made it? And are there any like demos or things that were shown about how it could be used or what kind of ideas could be implemented?
So this is, I mean, it's really pretty new. So even when you're like, what Stripe and OpenAI are the ones that actually sponsor and put this together, and you've already seen that collaboration with them where you can now do payments and checkouts directly in OpenAI. And so, but the agentic commerce protocol would allow you to basically go an agent to go out and communicate somewhere else and purchase a particular like item. So you could see this as a way to go out and order things from Amazon, for instance, or different retailers, which comes with like a little bit of, security concern of what happens if, I order 1,000 of these or things like that. But to me, what it really like starts to make us think about is we're going to have websites that are now interacting with AI agents, whether that's a protocol through the W3C, which is there's one called Web MCP, or if we actually have like agents that we now control that are doing as a client actions on our behalf, right? And so who do we then market to? Are we marketing to the consumer or are we marketing to the AI agent? So we might see like this SEO kind of change as well because, however you're describing your tools and your products is the AI agent going to go out and kind of look at should it purchase. So that to me is also a little bit of a futuristic kind of concept, but I do think we're moving into a world where we're going to give a task to maybe something mundane and say like, go buy my toilet paper. Like I don't want to have to think about that, but I care about it because it's very particular. And so
So some people might have seen like the ChatGPT agent mode, or I think there was other implementations of this. I think there's a tool called Do Browser, and the Comet browser also gives you the ability to type things and have it do stuff on the web. And I think with ChatGPT agent mode, you could attempt to get it to go purchase stuff or at least add stuff to the cart. But this is like a more official and like less hacky way of doing the thing where it's not necessarily you're acting like a human and going in and simulating what a human would do, but this is a protocol of how you can purchase things on the web. And so would companies have to implement it? So the idea is like if I'm not using a Shopify or something that already maybe comes supported with this, does that mean that like in my own shopping cart software I have to kind of build it so it's compatible with the protocol?
So it's still, I would definitely say it's still early stages, right? The examples that they're kind of showing is almost like you're living inside of a chatbot. And that chatbot will allow you to say like, here's how you check out. But what I've seen at least is some of the security protocols of how they're passing these keys back and forth. You could actually do like the AI agent do the checkout and basically ask for confirmation from the user, like, are you sure you want to purchase this, and do the payment that way. I think with as far as your question of like, will we have to implement it? I think step one, like, we still got to see it grow a little bit, but I do, and this will be like an implementation practice. Do I think that someone that's on a Shopify site would have to implement it in the same way? Probably not. I think that, more frameworks like Shopify will probably like take that on, or large retailers, right? Like Amazon, Target, whatever, Walmart will probably like be a part of this. And we've kind of seen some of that in the early stages of MCP where, Visa has an MCP, Walmart has an MCP, and some of those you can actually kind of get close to a checkout kind of scenario. I think this is the first step, very similar to like MCP, where MCP's first step was kind of like, how do we make this a universal protocol for people to use? This is a step in how do we make a commerce protocol as a universal way to for agents to kind of purchase. That's at least my interpretation of it.
Hey everyone, just a quick pause on today's episode to tell you about my day job. In addition to This New Way, I'm the CEO of a company called Fellow.ai, and Fellow is an AI meeting assistant. It joins all your meetings, it summarizes them, tracks the action items and the decision, and does that better than any other tool that you've seen. We've spent a ton of time making sure that the meeting notes and summaries and action items that come out of Fellow are the most accurate, the most precise. It beats any human. You have to try it. But in addition to that, what makes Fellow different is that it is the first AI note taker built from the ground up with security and privacy in mind. This means that you can use it for all your meetings, not just the customer-facing ones, but also the sensitive ones, things like one-on-ones and executive team meetings and those QBRs and everything in between. It's got really good judgment. So, for example, if you start a meeting and you're talking about some social stuff that you don't really want on the record that's going to get emailed to everyone afterwards, Fellow just knows. It just doesn't include those things. Or say you have something that you talked about and later on you realize, oh man, that shouldn't have been there. Makes it really easy. You can go back to the meeting, select that part, delete it, and then it's gone from the record. It connects to all of the other tools you use in the organization, whether that's Slack or Asana or HubSpot or Salesforce or Linear or Jira or Confluence, whatever it is, Fellow integrates with all those things. I think the best part is that Fellow also acts as an AI chief of staff. Because it sits on all the meetings and the conversations that you have access to, you can ask it really cool questions such as, what are the biggest opportunities in my company? What are the bottlenecks in engineering? And Fellow just pieces together information, sees trends, and it can answer those sorts of questions. It can even do things like, hey, based on all of the one-on-ones that I've had with this particular person, can you create them a performance review? And it can do things like that too. And the sky's really the limit. What I really wanted you to do is have the opportunity to try out Fellow, check it out, and we're making a special offer available to all our listeners. So just go to fellow.ai/thisnewway to try Fellow. There's a discount code in there for you if you decide to continue with it. Either way, I would love for you to try it and let me know what you think. And with that said, let's go back to the episode. I'd love for us to dive into the demos, but before we do, I have one more question. So, since you have spent a lot of time building on MCP and just being in the space, you also mentioned some security concerns around everybody just enabling MCP for everything. Are there any examples of things that have gone wrong or things that can go wrong that you can? Because like everybody's trying this stuff, and I think it's useful for them to know like what could go wrong.
So when we think about an MCP taking an action on your behalf, there's a couple of different things to think about. So if we, one of the things with MCP, at least in like the early stages and even up until now, is we were passing our authentication, our tokens along with our requests, right? And so you're almost like sending that as like on behalf of. And that's not maybe the best secure way to do this. And again, like this has been an evolution of security through MCP. In the beginning, there was like almost no security, right? And so as we continue to evolve, like we're starting to see things like OAuth as an example for MCP, where you are actually logging in as a typical user experience as opposed to passing like a token. So that's like one evolution thing. But I think when we start talking about MCP security and, things that can and do go wrong, we start to see a couple different things. So we'll see things like hallucinations in MCPs where maybe like the MCP itself is not malicious, even though that does actually exist. There are some MCPs that you could use that maybe were made by an unverified developer or whatever with nefarious acts. But, like, even beyond that, if we just think about the fact that an AI can hallucinate and could potentially run a command that could be destructive. So, like, in a development process, one of the things that I tend to look at is when we start talking about an MCP that can run executable commands locally, whether that's like delete or an executable to run some database commands or even a git command, we wanna, like, do things that can kinda protect ourselves, so having, like, permissions that prevent those kinds of things. So, I mean, I can tell you even for me personally, like, it was a development database, but I have accidentally had an AI run an npx, supabase reset command, and it reset my entire database without asking me to if it could reset it. Now, again, it was localhost, but you can imagine that happening in a production environment. Let's say you have and you're doing an AI agent command and you're editing some code and your MCP tries to figure out what the database credentials are and then executes on that. So is it rare? Maybe, but like how do we put in guardrails to kind of prevent that, but still enable us as developers to kind of move quickly without being lackadaisical about security?
I think that that makes a lot of sense. So the other thing that you said was a lot of people are building MCPs and they're just basically treating it as a wrapper on their currently existing API. Do you recommend that they not do that, or like from your perspective, what is the best way to put together an MCP server if you're building a product?
So for me, I would think about like what is the actual use and expectation for this? So if the expectation and use of this is to kind of be inside of Claude and basically bring in context to something or any chat, right? Like you're bringing context in, then maybe you kind of only expose certain parts of the API that are beneficial for that process. The other things that like a lot of MCPs aren't using is everyone is using tools for MCP, but you can actually build your own prompts. You can build your own resources for MCP. And so that allows you to give almost like a little bit more structure to an agentic experience and rather than just doing like an API call. So you could do an API call today and just use a tool. And so there's a lot of debate of like when should you use MCP, when should you use a tool? Do you really need tools when you have these other tools that are specifically for MCP? For me, like when I think about it, is I want to expose and create an agentic experience that is like really easy to understand and bring context or certain actions into the development of whatever I'm doing. So, like for instance, pulling information in, and one of the demos is like me pulling information in from an influencer, right? Getting up to date information. That to me could be done with like a transcript API, but if I build it in an agentic experience where you can enable like a search instead of pulling in the entire transcript, it makes it more functional for the user than saying like, oh, well, I have this transcript API that just gives you the entire transcript. Instead, I'm going to be doing like a semantic search kind of a thing.
Okay. And I think that's a really good segue for us to jump into demo section. So what's the first thing we're going to see?
Cool. All right. So a couple of things that we're going to go through. We're going to go through some MCP scenarios. So the first one is an example that I built, and it's called Influencer MCP. And what it does is we're actually going to use the native N MCP server. And we're basically going to take your YouTube channel and we're going to pull in all of the videos that you have on your channel. And then we're just going to ask a question. Right. And so there's essentially two stages to this workflow that we're going to go through.
I love this idea. It literally means that you can take any person and who has a YouTube channel, or and then basically almost like talk to that person. An influencer, like my channel is all about interviewing other people, so in a sense it's a mixture of information from a lot of people, but some YouTube channels are just you talking or one person doing the talking, and so you can literally talk to their entire knowledge base. I mean, it's such a cool concept.
And I'm not saying that you have to do this either, but, like, so you can make that a free tool. You can also potentially charge for, like, premium access if you wanted to do that. I'm using N8N to do this, so, like, I should preface, like, anyone can kinda build this, but so I'm in my N8N space, and the first thing we're gonna do is go to the flow. And so what this flow does is basically I can put in a new YouTuber and it will go out and it will fetch all the videos based on a timestamp and then go through and get that video, get the transcript information, and basically save the embedding. So like let's just think of it as the zeros and ones, even though it's a float, but the information converted to an AI that can read it, right? So an AI reads in numbers. And all that does is store it in a database, and that's it. So the first is just getting all of the data into the database in a way that an AI can read it. And then the second piece is actually exposing that. So here, what I've done is basically I have a bunch of different MCPs, and this is yours. And basically, it goes and it looks for a particular table, which has all the information from previously. So if we look at like the transcript here, we can see that this is pulling back from the new way, or this is, yeah, and pulling back the entire transcript. So then what I'm doing is I'm going to go into Claude and I'm basically just going to set this up. So if I go into Claude and I do a new chat, the first thing I kind of want to show is like you basically have to set up a MCP where you go into a connector and you can see right here I have this Aiden local connection for an MCP. And the way you do that in Claude or really like this could be used in Cursor, it could be used in any Goose, like any tool that allows an MCP. So I could actually, let's say you were going over specific techniques in one of the videos, I think was setting up ads and maybe we wanted to do that programmatically. I can actually take what was talked about and use it in my development cycle in Cursor if I wanted to kind of give Cursor more context of what I was doing. And so it works the same way as it would in Claude, where now I have that enabled and I can just start a new chat and I can say use the Aiden MCP.
I love this. It's so funny to see that written down, the 8N MCP. That's pretty funny.
I'm creating ads. So now what it's doing is it's going out and searching and it's already found a response. So this response is actually coming back from the database. So you can actually see right here, my question is there a way to that you kind of hinted at, blah, 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 blah. So it's literally pulling back all the information in chunks about the chat.
Yeah, I remember this episode. So yeah, this was around learning from your competitors, their ads are, and then using AI to basically, grab the insights from their ads so that you can create your own.
And this is kind of what I mean by you can actually connect MCPs to bring in more context. And so the MCP is directly related to like the input or like the information that you've been putting out, which will allow us to actually like pull that into context. And then you could actually build different things from this. You could ask it to create a white paper. You could ask it to come up with a strategy based on this piece, right? So that to me is where like MCP plays a huge role of like bringing information in. So we pulled off everything from YouTube that on your episode, and now we have it in our chat, and we can leverage that information.
So in terms of the database where all this stuff is put into, is that a supabase database or what are you using for the actual storage?
Yeah, so I don't actually use Supabase in this instance. I have used it. I just use regular Postgres. So I have a Postgres. I actually host my own Postgres through Coolify and Hetzner, and super like easy to do a one-click kind of deployment. And then basically I have a transcripts database, and then you have your own table, and then it just pulls that information back.
Amazing. And does this run on some sort of a cycle and it'll just when there's a new episode, it'll just pull it in?
Yep. So basically, I have a cron job. So every day it will check the previous 24 hours. And then that way it's always just gathering new information on the YouTube channel. So I don't really have to think about it. I don't have to do really anything. I have like the initial load, and then after that initial load, it pulls in every day.
This is super, super cool. So, how easy is it to build something like this? Is this something that, for people listening in, they can start from a template or to put something like this together?
Yeah, so this one's a little bit complex in the sense that I had to go out and write custom logic, right? You can see that I have like code blocks, I have different HTTP calls. But what's really cool and interesting about N8N is that they're actually making MCPs so that you can actually pull information from N8N. And there's this project called N8N MCP where you can actually build out the workflows. So I'm actually going to show that as well. This is where you actually have to kind of configure your own N8N. And so this is from a different developer, Ramullet, and he put this so that you can actually build your own workflows. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take this project, we're going to put it into Claude Code, and then we're going to build a workflow specifically. So one I was thinking about doing is just like, could we create like a simple leads funnel for a particular website or something? And so same kind of thing, we're just gonna kind of like check, make sure our Claude connector is available. So we have this N8N MCP. This is connected to my N8N. So N8N allows you to have API keys. And so all you need to do is connect it to your N8N instance. And then what we can do is we can come in here and we can actually just ask it. So use N8N MCP to create a webhook sales funnel to Excel. I feel like everybody like so this would allow us to basically take information from, for instance, even like from your Facebook ads, right? So when information comes through your Facebook ads, you can actually have it send information to a webhook. So we're gonna actually, or most more commonly, if you have like a landing page, you could actually hook this up. So anyone that's signing up, it's just gonna add it to an Excel spreadsheet. So what this is gonna do is same kind of thing. It's just gonna ask us along the way how we can connect. So first, it's checking to make sure that it exists. Then it's going to start looking through the nodes. It's going to list the nodes available. It's also going to find the documentation. So what this developer did is they made it so before you could always actually build N8N workflows in Claude, but the context wasn't up to date, right? So the documentation wasn't up to date. So he wrote it in a way where it's finding all the node documentation and then it's actually executing on the fact that N8N has an API. So this is a really another good example of when you're building an MCP, what should you include, right? So he's doing it in two different ways. One is he's gathering all the information from the documentation and the nodes specifically. And then he's also leveraging parts of the N8N API to actually send information and create a workflow on our behalf. And so, as you can see, it's kind of like pulled information on the nodes. So we're looking at the webhook node, we're getting more documentation.
JD, on the API, like this has to be an N8N hosted version of it, N8N, right? This isn't like a self hosted.
No, I'm actually using my self-hosted. Yep.
Oh, and you can use the API even for the self hosted version? Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yep. So both on the paid version and the self-hosted version, you can use this. I will say that like on on the paid version, the things that are also super helpful are like some of the execution, understanding like what's happening under the hood, a lot of like the error logs and stuff like that. This will work on either self-hosted or on paid version. And so now we actually have a flow. We this went in and created a sales funnel. It's gonna automatically like look for this type of information. It's expecting it from a website form, but we could always change that. And it actually gave me the workflow where it's located, which is my self-hosted version. And we'll go back and just kind of take a look at that flow. So I did this twice. So this is kind of the latest, right? So we have the reason that it's saying it's an error is because I just didn't tell it what webbook it is.
Hmm.
So maybe we could even do like an update and tell it to use Google Sheets instead. Right. And so now, like, whether you're technical or not, this gives you an opportunity to actually build workflows as if you were having a conversation.
This is amazing. It is like you're talking to someone who knows N8N really, really well, and you just talk to it, and then it's just going to build the flows. It's incredible to see. What it's a great implementation. So it actually, what's super interesting is it's looking up the latest documentation for each one of the nodes before it decides how to implement it.
Yep. And then you can even see the operations that it's gonna do, right? So you can remove the node, it's gonna add the latest. And, we talked about security. It's not just doing this without asking us, right? So if we don't wanna do this, we can say deny, or we can YOLO and say always allow, or we can just allow once. And so now what it's doing is that it's actually completing, the flow.
Yeah, this is super cool. By the way, N8N also has a way that you can just natively, and it will also produce the workflows as well, right?
So my understanding is that it doesn't have a way that will actually produce the flows on its own. I did hear that they are talking about doing something similar, but again, my understanding is that they were going to be doing more of like getting information. I could be wrong on that, but that was what I remember reading about, is that this N8N MCP that's an open source project is the way to, like, create a workflow.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting where this stuff is going. I know I've been playing with Zapier and also with Gumloop, and they have super interesting just flows where you're talking to their AI and it's building stuff in real time. And it certainly seems like the future in the sense that it's just easier to do. You don't have to learn the nodes and the nuances of each, and depending on which tool you're working in, what they're called. And yeah, so I think, like, whether it's through Claude or something else, this is the way of the future, I think.
I totally agree, and it's interesting that you bring up Zapier because I feel like they were one of the first to actually do
Mhm.
this. So they have something, I think they were calling it NLA, which is like natural language actions. And really early on, I was, like, trying to use Zapier to automate my Jira tickets. So you could actually, like, speak. Like, I was, like, speaking into I forget what I was using. Maybe, like, it wasn't Whisperflow, it's something like that.
Super whisper.
And that would actually, like, go and create Jira tickets on my behalf really early on. So I actually have, like, a really old video on that. But yeah, they kind of paved the way, I would say, for how do you put together workflows and do action based through natural language.
It's super interesting. They now also have an agent mode, which is it's not like drawing boxes and connecting it to each other. It's literally like, here's the steps, and
Mhm.
it's all natural language. And so when you edit it, you're just literally like changing the lines of like step 4, type it differently. So it's interesting to see where it will all go.
Definitely. That was kind of like the main pieces of how can we like build a flow and kind of pull it into Claude, and then how can we actually create a flow. Some of the other stuff that I've done is, or at least like trying to really dig into now, is we kind of talked about that security aspect. So how can we actually authenticate to something like this without actually putting in my API tokens, right? So if I wanted to share this, then like it could potentially become compromised. And so what I've been doing is working through MCP and how can you use OAuth. And so think of that as like how, log in with Google, log in with Twitter, log in with whatever. In Claude, there's through this same thing called connectors, is the ability to actually do like a connection, right? So we see this where like you early on you could do specific partners like connect with Google or HubSpot or whatever. And now what we're starting to see is, could we actually make these connectors ourselves? And with those connectors, could we actually charge? And so not only can you do this in Claude, you can actually do this in Cursor as well. So if you look at like down here where cursor has like this notion needs authentication and you have the connect button, it's actually going to go out and try and authenticate through OAuth. So this is kind of like the next step, in my opinion, on MCPs and like how you could use them in Cursor or Claude, or even OpenAI now has custom connectors in beta. And so what that kind of looks like is if I wanted to come in here, I'm going to disconnect from boilerplate and I'm going to try and reconnect. So this is a custom MCP that I've built as like again, I haven't released it yet, but it's a boilerplate where you could create your own MCPs. You connect it to Stripe and you have like your whole authentication piece in here. So basically what you can do is you click connect. It's going to go out to Claude and it's looking through like a traditional authentication and it should pop back with the ability to look at Twitter. So, or not look at Twitter, but actually connect. So now what we're doing is, as you can see, like I clicked the connect, it's going to authenticate into Twitter, right? So I created a Nerding.io application. I can now authorize this and I should be able to launch back into Claude.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode. One of the common things that we hear is, hey, you all talk about all these different tools, you walk through these demos. Sometimes it's hard for me to follow along. We decided to do recently was take all the things that we talk about, put them in a weekly newsletter. We literally list all the tools, we link to them, and any demo that we walk through, we break it down step by step, put it in this newsletter so it's super easy for you to follow along. And the other nice thing is that if there's someone on your team that you think could benefit, they're working on that subject area, they could use a little bit of AI injection into their workflow, send them the newsletter, send them that particular episode. We make it super easy to do that. It's free to sign up. All you have to do is go to thisnewway.com, enter your email address, and you'll get this weekly email from us. Hope you enjoy it. With that said, let's go back to the episode. So you built this MCP that is going to allow you to access Twitter.
Yeah, so I just want to like pause on one thing. So you could technically access Twitter, but really what I'm doing is I am using Twitter as my authentication tool. So I could just as easily say I want to authenticate into Gmail, right? Or Google, or it's literally just the authentication piece. So I could ask for permissions to then pull back Twitter information. But really what I'm doing in this instance is I am saying I want you to be able to log in with the third party of your choice. And that is my authentication tool in order to use my custom MCP. So now that you've authenticated with Twitter, even though I'm not necessarily pulling anything back from Twitter, I know that the email address that you've used in Twitter is attached to my MCP service and authenticated. And then and even furthermore is like I've actually connected this boilerplate to Stripe. So anytime that you use this MCP, you've already paid for your subscription and I'm doing metered billing where I'm saying, okay, you paid $20 a month and you get 100,000 actions basically of MCP. So it's kind of like an MCP that acts as like a service, like a paid service, like a metered paid service. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it makes sense because I mean, as you showed, you typically go in, you type in, you go into Cursor or Claude, type in the information for the MCP server, you connect to it,
Hmm.
and basically, typically, you just start using it right away. But you're introducing an authentication mechanism in between,
Yep.
and what you're also saying is that you could connect this to a Stripe account, in
Correct.
which case, so instead of Twitter that you just showed, it could basically connect a Stripe account and then actually ask for payment. So would you have to have a Stripe account for to be billed through the MCP?
You don't need a Stripe account. What would happen is you would log in through Twitter and then it presents like because I've already signed up, it presents you with a Stripe link and then you check out the same as you would through like a website.
Mm-hmm.
And
Got
now
it.
I have an MCP that is attached to a subscription. And that Stripe subscription has a usage rate of however much and you can leverage this MCP.
Oh,
So
I love this. Yeah. So basically, it's just a way for you to make sure you know who it is
mhm,
and just do solving authentication for MCP. That's
right.
super cool.
And
So is this live? What?
yeah, so I'm planning on like both selling this as like developers can purchase the boilerplate and leverage it, or as like a service. So if you want to connect to an MCP and build out your own piece. Like I also do a lot of education. So this kind of goes into a system or a community I'm calling the Vibe Coding Retreat, where like if you have an idea for a service, do almost like an executive retreat where I'll either come to a company and teach more technical people, or if you're like a non-technical person, I'll show you how to vibe code this. But it's more of like a service. But the idea being is that you now walk away with an MCP that you can go and sell, or you can think about like even like GPTs that are authenticated that you could go out and sell. That's the process I'm trying to do. So like if we here, I'll do use boilerplate MCP. And before I do this, the other thing I want to show is that when you go to tools, because you signed into the boilerplate MCP, you have it shows you which tools are available, right? And so this paid echo is what we're going to call. And all it's going to do is return my name. And we're just going to say JD. Oops. And now what it's going to do is it's going to run an MCP the same as it usually would. It's going to run a paid echo. It's going to send a message of JD. And then I get a response. And it says the response was JD echoed back. But what's super interesting about this is if you come back, if I'm the person that's selling this product and I go and I look at my Stripe implementation, I have a registered event of a metered event of a credit that is being leveraged for this particular user for today. Right. So now I know who's using my MCP. I know there's like a limit to how many times they can use it. And there's more insights into this MCP as a product as opposed to an MCP that is just getting kind of leveraged as an API. Right. So now this is where I'm saying like MCP can actually be more of a product instead of just an API wrapper.
I love this. This is super cool. I'm, for everybody listening and watching in, I mean, this is probably going to become the way that what people do with MCPs. And you saw it here first. This is before N8N, tries to do the same thing. JD is an innovator, has done this multiple times before. So really cool. And thank you for showing that to us. So let's talk about the way that people can reach out. So you have the Vibe Coder retreat. What's the URL for people who want to participate?
Yeah, so it's just vibecodingretreat.com. There's two different ways to participate. There's a community itself where I do kind of just like one off, almost like not really campaigns, but like 3-day kind of challenges where you can kind of step through different AI processes. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're paid. The retreat itself is going to different cities and actually doing like a 3-day event in person. The idea is that you can come with an app idea, or again, it could go to like a particular company and do more of an executive thing. But the idea is, smaller cohorts of like-minded thinkers, tinkerers, and builders coming together to kind of like build their own app and do it as a getaway. I'm in the process of putting one together for Detroit, kind of modeling it off of like the hackathon space. We've done like some tests with the curriculum on different hackathons and things like that. And, also have the ability to be online if you want. But the idea is kind of more like personalized training on these kind of concepts that are, ever changing. I mean, even since the time that I've like started launching this, I've like rewritten the curriculum because like Claude 2.0 just came out and now there's like a whole bunch of different key shortcuts that you can use and different techniques and stuff like that. And so the space is always evolving and, trying to make hands-on way to evolve with it.
So we'll include this in the show notes. And I think the best way to learn this stuff, and I think JD, you would agree, is you have to. It's not enough to watch, this video, watch this podcast, but you have to start doing things. And what better way to do things in person, and also with a chaperone, right? So people are going to run into issues, and then you can help them solve it. That last 10% is really hard, and where people get frustrated. If you want to get into this stuff, this is the way to do it.
I agree. I think the hands-on, I mean, even for me, the hands-on approach is like the way that I like to learn. And so what better way to kind of learn from people that have done, like the way I look at my job is like 80% of what I did before, like AI is helping to like automate or make easier. And so that last 10 to 20% is really the legacy knowledge that I've accrued. And so like how can I help this new group of developers? So anyone that's a vibe coder, to me, they're developers, like they're starting their new path in coding, and how do we work through that and just be a good steward of the industry and see like, okay, well, if you're building, like, let's try and figure out good ways to build a more secure and scalable way.
Well, JD, thank you so much. This has been amazing, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to be back, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
All right.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of This New Way. If you like the content, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you can get notified when we post the next episode. See you next time.